Welcome back to Recruiting Blitz. My name is Tim Verghese. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Before we get started, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to check out our work over at InsideNebraska.com as well. We're in a bit of a gap between home games, and so figured this is a good opportunity to just kind of circle back and just kind of reset the table a little bit and see what's left for Nebraska here in the 2026 cycle as they look to put the finishing touches on the class. Haven't made obviously any recent decisions, but they're or any recent additions, but they're working to address some needs, safety, defensive line, jack linebacker, also looking at a third receiver in the class if they can find one. And there's a couple more targets still out there for Nebraska. So just kind of want to run down what's left. So talking uncommitted targets, I guess, there's really just two true targets really left for Nebraska uncommitted. One is three-star edge rusher Demond Lewis out of Charlotte Myers Park, a program that's produced D1 talent year in and year out, and does have a tradition of producing top talent. He's down to he had a top five announced in the summer or early in the summer, and Nebraska offered closer to the season or early in the season of his senior season. And they're now working to get him on campus next month. I'm expecting him on campus. At some point, and I do think Nebraska has a shot here. I think what's going to decide Nebraska's chances is how serious are they about Lewis adding him to the class, and what his relationship like with Rule, what his impression is of Rule and the staff. For those that don't know, Demond is the younger brother of former LSU, current Carolina Panthers guard Damian Lewis, who was drafted by Rule when Rule was with the Panthers. So I don't know what their relationship's like. I don't know for sure if it's good. For the most part, Rule's done a good job of um, you know, uh, connecting with the players in this locker room. And for the most part, every former player we've talked to has had a positive impression. But the NFL was obviously a different story. It did not go as well as it had at the college level. And so I don't know 100% what that relationship's like. And you're still battling Washington, NC State, Florida State, Texas A&M still a little involved. But I do think this comes down to Florida State, Washington, NC State, and Nebraska. So look for Nebraska to try and get him on campus at some point here in these final three home games and really just trying to add, you look at him at the player, you look at the build and the frame. There's some the best comp I can give him is a little similar to Cam Leonard, just in terms of I think what Nebraska would want to do with him, his play style as well, and what you're looking for that frame over these next 2 years. That's the kind of development you're looking for. The other true 26 uncommitted targets still on the board is Juju Johnson out of Farrell, Pennsylvania. This is not the 2027 four-star cornerback. This is the 2026 athlete out of Pennsylvania that was kind of sneaky, kind of under the radar, offered shortly after Nebraska landed the commitment of Danny Odom. Those two are really close. They obviously, Odom originally hails from Farrell, Pennsylvania. Those two have played high school together in the past, are quite close, would love the opportunity to play together at the next level as well. Nebraska has essentially a modern PWO offer to him in the sense that he has an offer as in a spot on the roster. He's been offered a spot on the roster, but he won't probably won't sign a rev share agreement. There won't be any NIL attached or anything like that. And that's kind of just that situation. And so that's something I'm keeping an eye on just because he's got a few other offers. He's having a really nice senior season, primarily playing running back, but also plays DB. Kind of seen as an athlete by Nebraska right now. And he's planning to visit for the USC game November 1st with Danny Odom, Nebraska's top ranked 2026 commit. Would bode well for Nebraska's chances of keeping Odom if they do land Johnson. But I do think that's an active evaluation process as Nebraska kind of figured out how many spots they have left, what they need to address this offseason with the roster, and kind of where things stand with Odom as well. If he's 100% locked in, I think it's a good chance Johnson comes with. But Michigan's still after him, Ohio State is still after him. If there's I think there's a semblance of a flip. I think it's going to be more of a wait and see type thing until December, closer to signing day. But those are the two like true, I think, targets right now for Nebraska that have been on the board for a couple of weeks now. Last week, Sarasota Booker, four-star wide receiver, Tyron Wortham decommitted from Michigan State. Nebraska's hopped in the mix. Auburn's in the mix. UCF's in the mix. He was at one point committed to UCF, or was heavily leaning UCF. So that's a school I'd keep an eye on. But obviously, drop the SEC, drop the Big Ten is going to be real. And he's not a big framed receiver like what Nebraska is kind of looking for with this third spot. But he's really talented, and I think the type of receiver Nebraska makes an exception for as the third guy in this room. talking some flip targets, there's still a few more out there, and I will say this too, just before we get into flip targets, I think there's a chance. Don't think, good chance. Another name or two pops up on Nebraska's board over these next few weeks. We just saw. Obviously, Penn State fire James Franklin. You're going to see more movement in the coming weeks. Wisconsin's Luke Fickell's on the hot seat. Billy Napier down in Florida's on the hot seat. Some talented recruits could come back available before signing day, and that's something I think Nebraska's also keeping an eye on. Why they haven't been super aggressive in trying to address some of these needs because they recognize that they're going to have an opportunity to circle back on some guys they may have lost out the first time around, or have an opportunity to really get back into recruitment they didn't think they had a shot in previously. So that's something to monitor over these next few weeks. Obviously, the Franklin news is going to create some dominoes. I think you're going to see some really big coaching movement here in the next few weeks. Schools are going to be not as patient over these next few weeks just because Penn State's already, kind of pursuing a head coach. You've already got, multiple programs at this point already pursuing a head coach. No one wants to be left behind. Signing day so early, like you just don't want to get left behind. And so I think that's where Nebraska's at with it too. I think that's how they see it, and I think they are keeping an eye on how. And obviously they for the most part are not planning on being part of this coaching carousel, but they are keeping an eye on how the carousel can affect their recruiting class. Now for flip targets, the firing of James Franklin does deeply impact this recruitment. Nebraska still after Virginia three-star wide receiver commit Josiah Teasley. He visited last week to see Nebraska take on Michigan State. Has been committed to Virginia since June. Enjoyed his first trip to Nebraska, but he was at Penn State the week before, and Penn State was working to get him back on an official visit. That could still happen, but he's also looking to get back to Nebraska for an official visit. And I fully expect that to happen at this point after his first trip, and with the kind of the changes at Penn State, I would kind of lean Nebraska here. I like Nebraska's chances of pulling off this flip. I don't know if it's going to be a straight flip or it's going to be one of those things where he decommits and resets. I would keep an eye on Syracuse a little bit. I still think they're trying. Vanderbilt's still trying. I think there's a few schools still involved. But like where Nebraska stands, especially after the news that James Franklin is no longer going to be the head coach of Penn State. And then the other one is, of course, Cameron Wilson. Again, another Syracuse mentioned, four-star edge rusher committed to Syracuse. Nebraska working to flip him away. Florida State working to flip him away. UCF still involved too. At this point, I don't love where Nebraska stands. He's not been able to make it to campus yet. I don't. I think he will. I think he's going to make it on campus before the season wraps up. I think he's um, a guy the staff would really like to get on board. I think he's their top jack target at this point, a guy they have a really strong relationship with, and a guy they'd love to pull out of the state of Florida. That said, I think the draw of staying closer to home is very real. I think if he's going to flip, it's going to be Florida State or UCF at this point. He is also tentatively planning to see Miami when they play Syracuse, and that's to see Syracuse in action. I could see the Hurricanes get involved before this is all over. So it's something I'm monitoring. I think Florida State right now is the school to beat. I think Terrence Knighton has done a good job there of especially with the way that program's played. But I don't think the doors necessarily close on Nebraska. If he makes it back on campus before signing day, I do feel good about I feel better about Nebraska's chances. I think is the best way to put that because I thought there were multiple times in this recruitment in the spring, in the summer, there were multiple times I thought Nebraska was the school best position to pull it off, flip them away from Syracuse. But Syracuse has doubled down from an NIL standpoint, made him feel like a priority. Him and Jarris Rogers, their two edge targets or edge commits in this 26 class, plus their wide receiver commit Calvin Russell. They kind of have the money right now to kind of pay these guys at premium positions that they feel are instant difference makers, like premium positions and are competitive with the very top of the sport for those guys. And so I think that's part of it right now. I think Syracuse has done a good job of making him feel like a priority and making sure he doesn't go anywhere. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I think that's one I've got a close eye on. One I'm feeling even less confident about is Jordan Campbell, the Miami four-star edge commit. I think the door is just about closed on Nebraska unless they somehow are able to get him back on campus. But at this point, from the way Miami's played on the field, the fact that he's made zero visits elsewhere, I think he's sticking with the Hurricanes. I think at this point I wouldn't consider him a true viable target for Nebraska here in the 2026 cycle. His teammate, however, Tedarius Hughes, four-star safety committed to Florida State, is still a very much a top target on Nebraska's board. Still very much a viable target. One they're still pushing to get on campus, and they have an official visit left to use with them. So I'm expecting him. The next visit is going to be an official visit. They brought him in for a midweek unofficial in June. Now they're set to get him back on campus In the next few weeks, at least that's the plan. He still hasn't really locked in a date. I've been in frequent touch, but have not been able to figure out a date just yet. For that, just with this high school schedule, with playoffs and everything, I think he's still feeling all of that out. But this is another one Syracuse is still involved in. I think a few programs closer to home are still involved, and ultimately, I think this comes down to Florida State, Nebraska, Syracuse. If Nebraska gets that second visit from him, if Nebraska is able to show him a good time on campus and put some more results together on the field, continue to pile up the wins, hit that 8 or 9 mark. I feel good about their chances, especially as you're seeing Florida State start to stagnate a little bit on the field. I think there's an opportunity here for Nebraska, and he's the very top of their safety board at this point. He's a big playmaking safety, big athlete, willing to come down and hit, but can cover as well, and is versatile and a guy they'd love to add and kind of round out this DB class. Pair him up with Danny Odom. I think that's something they'd really like to do. The other one, speaking of Odom, his teammate Devin Jackson, Oregon four-star safety commit. I think that door is just about closed on Nebraska, but at the same time, he's really close with Odom. Those two have talked about playing together at the next level. That opportunity hasn't really been there at very many schools, but Nebraska is one of the schools that has pushed this entire time about pairing those two up together, and they've made visits together prior to both of their commitments to Oregon and Nebraska. They made a bunch of visits together. They wanted to go, and kind of explore that quietly. They were both at the Penn State game to see Oregon, Penn State. Devin was there to see Oregon. Danny was just back in town in Pennsylvania and caught a game. I will say this, especially now, or Penn State's not a real threat for Danny Odom. The way a source put it to me was he left Pennsylvania to go play high school football in Florida for a reason. The plan was not to come back to Pennsylvania, and unless something seriously changes, I don't expect that to change. So I do expect him to stick with Nebraska at this point. And the biggest threat it would be Ohio State and Michigan, and even that, I think the odds of them pulling that flip off are slimming a good bit. I think momentum's really dying for both the Wolverines and the Buckeyes with Odom. And yeah, so talking flip targets, another one, just in the sense that it's been he's at least open, is four-star safety Jacob Eberhardt, an athlete out of Kirkwood, Missouri. Nebraska was in on, was kind of seen as this cycle's kind of Jeremiah Jones, a bigger, like right around 6'2", a bigger athlete that can play multiple positions. He plays receiver, he plays safety. He's had some interest as a linebacker as well. There's a multiple places schools are open to playing Eberhardt at. Nebraska likes him at safety. They'd like another shot if they can get it. He's at least receptive. He's been open to other programs, but at the same time, he's back at Illinois over the weekend. There was an emotional connection there. Of course, he kind of stunned some people with his commitment to Illinois in the summer, because everyone felt it was going to be Oklahoma. A couple other programs still in the mix too, but everyone felt it was going to be Oklahoma. Then day of, he commits to Illinois, following in the footsteps of his late father. So really emotional. There's an emotional connection to the program. I think it's going to be tough to flip him away, especially with the football Illinois is playing. Save for that, obviously the Ohio State loss, but they're playing generally good ball. I think he believes in the trajectory of that program. But, if anyone can do it, I think it'd be Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma. I think the regional powers are still the ones still kind of in the mix, still maintaining a relationship to see if something can happen before it's all said and done. And then, like I said, I think there's a few others that could emerge, like, with Penn State, that opening. Does Nebraska, try their hand at someone like Matt Sieg, a four-star safety commit out of Pennsylvania? More likely than not, a lot of their commits are going to end up sticking, as weird as that sounds, even with Franklin gone. They're all Pennsylvania guys. They've been locked in with that class for a while. I do expect whoever takes over next at Penn State is going to keep some of those assistants and some of that personnel staff around. And so I don't think there's going to be as much movement as you think. I don't think there's going to be just a mass exodus. Now in 27, you've already seen that. Penn State's already lost all their 27 commits. That's different. But in 26, a lot of these guys have been locked in for a while. Are big fans of Nebraska, or big fans of Penn State, and are like kind of Pennsylvania guys for the most part. And so I don't really know. I mean, Syracuse and Pitt and programs close to their part of the country are certainly going to try, but I don't know exactly how many Penn State commits take visits elsewhere or even become truly available. Even with a few weeks still left in this season. So curious to see how that continues to shake out. And then, like I said, Florida, if that job opens up, I think there's a few guys Nebraska would be really interested in circling back on. in that Florida class. And Florida targets as well. Wisconsin has a few commits and players on the roster right now. I think Nebraska would like another shot at if those guys were to explore other visits or potentially enter the transfer portal for the guys currently on the roster. There's a few guys on that roster I think Nebraska would like a shot at. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on here these next few weeks, just how these job openings affect commitments, how kind of different, you've seen Tech obviously having a good year, Indiana having another really good year, like how some of these teams that, are kind of building something different, are kind of newcomers to the contender table, how they maybe shake things up late in this cycle. I think there's some opportunities. It's going to be a pretty chaotic flip season. Maybe not necessarily for Nebraska. They only have a handful of spots. There isn't all that much they can do here in 26, but there's going to be flips, big crazy flips elsewhere that are going to create some dominoes. There are going to be some talent that becomes available, maybe some coaches that become available. It's going to be a crazy couple months around here. So stay tuned to InsideNebraska.com. We'll have more updates through the week, especially coming out of this Penn State firing, what this means for Nebraska. Obviously, Matt Rule all on the hot boards and expect you to be a contender for this job. So we'll be tracking the intel on that and have updates through the week and through these next few weeks potentially as well. So stay tuned to InsideNebraska.com. We appreciate you guys tuning in. That'll just about do it for us. We'll be back with another episode next week.